The roar of cannons, the splintering of wood, and screams. The deck is slippery with blood and gunpowder. Your comrade lies at the foot of the mast, his leg a mangled mess of bone and flesh. The man leaning over him isn't a doctor, he's the ship's carpenter. In his hands is not a scalpel, but a saw. He is about to cut off that leg, without anesthesia, without the slightest concept of sterility. And here's the most shocking part. The wounded man has a better chance of survival than he would in the finest hospital in London. At that time, hospitals were ravaged by hospital fever, sepsis. It killed up to 80% of patients after surgery. Paradoxically, a filthy deck in the open sea was safer than a clean hospital ward. The secret wasn't the rum, but 3 brutal rules that we would consider barbaric today. In this hell of pain and pitching waves, a man who was not a doctor gave his patient a real chance. A butcher defeated death where doctors failed. After all, even official naval surgeons were nicknamed sawbones. They were valued for their speed, not their skill. The pirate carpenter was simply the most extreme version of this reality. We will break down the 3 stages of such an operation. A brutal, yet ingenious tool to stop the bleeding, an unexpected medicine from the bottom of any barrel, and a living surgeon feared more than the amputation itself. This crawling surgeon used no scalpel. It literally devoured dead flesh, leaving the living tissue untouched. And the first step to salvation was taken not by a doctor, but by the most unexpected member of the crew. This man was the ship's carpenter, or the cook. Whoever had the sharpest knives and the steadiest hands. He knew anatomy, not of a man, but of a ship. He would fix a broken mast the same way he fixed a broken bone, crudely, quickly, and to make it hold. Alexander Exquemelin, a 17th-century pirate surgeon, wrote that there was often no one on board with medical knowledge. The job fell to whoever held a saw with the most confidence. His toolkit was a nightmare for any modern surgeon. A heavy bone saw, a sharp meat knife, common pliers to pull out lead bullets and wooden splinters. These were tools of a trade, not of salvation. And sterilization with fire or seawater was a form of torture. But dipping a tool in salt water created a hyperosmotic environment, literally desiccating some bacteria. It was an intuitive, brutal form of antisepsis. Yes, rum flowed freely, but it wasn't for pain relief. It was for courage, and to drown out the screams. From a physiological standpoint, this was suicide. Alcohol causes vasodilation, blood vessels expand, pressure drops, and blood gushes from the wound not in a stream, but in a flood. A bottle of rum often turned a difficult operation into a deadly race against time. So, the crew holds the wounded man down with a death grip. The carpenter raises the saw. The patient is conscious. He sees everything. But the surgeon's first act will not be a cut. It is a simple, almost primitive gesture that will double the chances of survival. The carpenter drops his saw. He takes a piece of canvas and a short, strong stick. It's a tourniquet, the simplest device, one that puts death on pause. He wraps the canvas above the wound, inserts the stick, and begins to twist. The fabric bites into the flesh. Muscles and vessels are compressed with inhuman force. The pirates intuitively understood the most important thing. The bleeding had to be stopped before the butchery began. With a severed femoral artery, a man can bleed out in 3 to 5 minutes. The tourniquet bought them that time. It wasn't the saw that saved a life, but a tightly cinched rope. It clamped the artery, and only then did the real work begin. There was no surgical precision, only speed. With a single motion, the knife sliced through skin, fat, and muscle, down to the bone. Then the saw came into play. The operation took no more than 2 minutes. The longer this hell lasted, the higher the chance of dying from shock. This isn't just pain, it's a signal to the body that it is being destroyed. The system fails, the heart beats erratically, and then it just stops. Speed was the only medicine for this shock. For a second, imagine yourself in the place of the comrades holding the wounded man. What sound would be more terrifying? Your friend's scream of pain, or the grating of the saw as it bites into his bone? For the crew, that grating sound was the sound of their own, albeit necessary, barbarism. It was the price of survival. And then, the leg is amputated. The tourniquet must be removed, or gangrene will set in. But as soon as the knot is loosened, life would begin to pour out of the man in dozens of red streams. Imagine a tree stump oozing sap. Now imagine every artery and vein is a separate fountain pulsing with the rhythm of the heart. This fountain had to be sealed instantly. They had no thread or needles to suture the vessels, but they had fire. And what they did next was both torture and salvation. Enlightened surgeons of the time were already trying to use ligatures, tying off vessels with thin threads. But in the filth of a ship, these threads often introduced infection, leading to a slow and agonizing death. The ligature was precise but dirty. The pirate method was crude but clean. The purity of fire versus the purity of rotting thread. An axe blade or a thick knife was pulled from the coals of the ship's forge. It wasn't sterile, it was red hot. This was a brutal but exact science. The metal had to glow cherry red. If it was too cool, it would simply stick to the living flesh, tearing it away in chunks. If it was too hot, glowing white, it would cut like a knife without sealing the wound. Only the right temperature produced the desired effect. The hot metal instantly seared the blood proteins in vessel walls, creating a dense scab. It was like soldering a leaking pipe, only the pipe was your artery, and the soldering iron was a red-hot axe. Without knowing it, the pirates were using the principle of thermal coagulation, which is the basis of modern electrosurgery. For the wounded man, this was the worst part. The pain from the fire was more intense than the pain from the saw. The air filled with the thick smell of burning flesh. And then, a loud sizzle, as if water had been thrown onto a hot skillet. This sound was the signal. The blood was clotting. The bleeding was stopping. At this point of maximum agony, hope was born. He would live. Pain and salvation became one. But now the torture was over. The bleeding had stopped. But an open, charred wound remained on the body, a perfect gateway for an enemy more fearsome than any Spanish galleon. For infection, gangrene and sepsis, which killed more often in hospitals than the trauma itself. The pirates needed a shield against this invisible killer, and they used something any doctor would have considered absolute madness. This shield was made of ship's tar, hot, black, viscous tar. It wasn't applied. It was poured directly into the wound. They caulked a man just as they would caulk the seams of the ship to keep him from leaking. It was an airtight, waterproof seal against the world. But the main secret was inside. Pine tar is a natural chemical weapon. It is saturated with phenols and chrysols, the same compounds from which Joseph Lister would create the world's first antiseptic, carbolic acid, a century and a half later. The pirates were intuitively waging chemical warfare on microbes long before Louis Pasteur proved their existence. But what if this barrier failed? If the wound began to rot, emitting the sweet smell of death? Then, a second, even more gruesome living medicine was used. Maggots were placed on the wound. Not just any maggots, but specifically those of green bottle flies. This was perfect biosurgery. Maggots are true gourmands. They devour only dead necrotic tissue, fastidiously avoiding the living. Their saliva is a powerful cocktail of antibacterial enzymes and allantoin, a substance that not only disinfects but also stimulates healthy cells to grow faster. This was a microscopic surgeon that cleaned a wound more precisely than any doctor. Credibility score. Direct pirate records are scarce. But Napoleon's chief surgeon, Baron Larry, noticed that soldiers with maggots in their wounds survived more often. He was the first to use them intentionally. Likelihood of pirate use, 8 out of 10. Modern scientific efficacy, 10 out of 10. The method is still used today. And there was another ally, the sea itself. The air in the open ocean was practically sterile compared to the filthy, overcrowded hospitals on land. Doctors believed in the theory of miasmas, or bad air that carried disease. The theory was wrong, but the observation was absolutely correct. The salty breeze was cleaner than any city smog. Tar, maggots, fire, and a saw. It sounds like a recipe for certain death, but the numbers tell a different story. And when you learn how many patients survived these operations compared to the Royal Navy, you will understand who the real butchers were. And here are the numbers. They are not just shocking, they turn the world upside down. According to modern reconstructions, the survival rate after an amputation on a pirate ship could reach 60 and sometimes even 70%. Now listen to this. In the best hospitals of London and Paris, mortality from post-operative infections reached up to 80%. Only 1 in 5 survived. On a pirate ship, 1 in 3 died. Even during the Napoleonic Wars, which were later and better documented, the mortality rate after a thigh amputation was 70%. The pirate carpenter with his bloody saw was achieving results that military surgeons could only dream of. Why? The answer lies in 3 simple principles. First, speed. The operation was performed immediately. On land, a wounded man was transported to a hospital where he waited for hours, while gangrene was already raging inside his body. Second, pragmatism. Pirates were not burdened by outdated medical theories, while licensed doctors, following the ancient humoral theory, weakened patients with bloodletting to balance the body's fluids. Pirates solved real problems, stopped the bleeding, killed the infection. And third, isolation. Fewer people in clean sea air reduced the risk of cross-contamination that decimated patients in hospital wards. Now let's return to our carpenter with the saw. He no longer seems like a cruel executioner. He is a pragmatic hero, acting out of brutal necessity. His task was not to cure, but to save. And in that, he was a genius. The licensed doctor was like a programmer trying to fix a broken server with obsolete, non-functional code. The pirate carpenter was an engineer who simply took out and physically replaced the burnt-out component. It was crude, but it worked. The brutal methods of pirates are not just a historical anecdote. They are a true code of survival in extreme conditions. And from it, we can draw 3 lessons that are still relevant today. Here they are. The 3 rules of this code. First, the cannonball rule. In a crisis, your main enemy is delay. Decisive, albeit imperfect, action is always better than a perfect plan that arrives too late. Second, the red-hot iron rule. Do not be afraid of radical solutions. Sometimes the only method that works is the most painful and the most brutal. And third, the tar and rope rule. Use what you have on hand. Brilliant solutions often lie outside the instruction manual. They are born from chaos and necessity. These rules are not about medicine. They are a universal algorithm for decision-making under conditions of absolute uncertainty. They are about resilience, about the ability to cast aside everything non-essential to save what truly matters. In essence, the pirate surgeon operated on a principle that the U.S. Air Force today calls the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. It is the foundation of modern strategy for survival and victory in any crisis. Pirates didn't read strategy textbooks. They simply lived by these laws, or died by them. So what was the pirate surgeon in the end? A brilliant practitioner ahead of his time? Or a ruthless butcher who just got lucky? Write just one word in the comments, genius or butcher. I'm very curious to see which side has more.